Eliza O'Connell choked on gunpowder smoke, the acrid tang burning her nostrils. A Union shell had just ripped through the second story of Mrs. Surratt's boarding house, sending splinters of wood and chunks of plaster raining down. Eliza coughed, wiping dust from her eyes. Another boom shook the building. "Get down, girl," boomed a voice. It was Caleb, her contact, a burly man with a perpetually worried frown etched on his face. He hauled her behind a shattered table. The message. Eliza shouted over the din, her heart hammering against her ribs. Caleb patted his coat. "Safe, but this place is compromised. We have to move now." He grabbed her arm, pulling her towards the back stairs. As they ran, Eliza felt a sharp sting on her scalp. She reached up, her fingers brushing against something stiff and unfamiliar tangled in her hair. A hairpin? No, something else. She glanced back at Caleb. He was already halfway down the stairs, urging her on. What had he put in her hair? And why now? Caleb didn't offer an explanation as they burst out the back of the boarding house and into a narrow alley. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. He pushed her forward, his grip tight. "Where are we going?" Eliza gasped, dodging a runaway wheelbarrow. "Safer house," he grunted, not breaking stride. "Less conspicuous." The safer house turned out to be a cramped, dimly lit milliner's shop a few blocks away. A bell jingled as they entered, and a woman with tired eyes and flour dusting her apron looked up from a half-finished bonnet. "Caleb," she acknowledged with a curt nod. Upstairs, they climbed a rickety staircase to a small, sparsely furnished room. Caleb finally stopped, panting slightly. He turned to Eliza, his worried frown deeper than ever. "All right, girl. Show me." Eliza frowned, confused. "Show you what? What was that you put in my hair?" Caleb's eyes darted nervously around the room. "Later, the message, Mrs. Greenhouse's message. It's secure?" Eliza's hand instinctively went back to her hair, probing the strange object. It felt like a tightly wound coil. "I think so." "I haven't had a chance to—" "Get it out, Eliza, now. Every second counts." Caleb's voice was sharp, laced with a desperation she hadn't heard before. Hesitantly, she began to untangle the strands around the object. It was indeed a coil made of something stiff and waxy. As she worked, she realized it was covered in hair, not hers, fine blonde hair. Finally, she freed the coil and held it in her palm. It was surprisingly heavy. She looked at Caleb, her face a mask of questions. He snatched the coil from her hand and began to carefully unwind it. Inside, nestled amongst the blonde hair, was a tiny rolled-up piece of paper. He unfurled it, his lips moving silently as he read. "Damn," he muttered, crushing the paper in his fist. "Damn them all to hell. What is it?" "What does it say?" Eliza demanded, her anxiety growing with each passing second. Caleb looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and anger. "It's bad, Eliza, real bad. The Union is planning a major offensive. They know about everything, everything." Her voice was barely a whisper. "How?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter how. What matters is getting this information to Richmond. And that," he added, his gaze hardening, "is going to be a lot harder now." He paced the small room, his brow furrowed in thought. "They must suspect something. Putting the message in your hair. It was a risk, a desperate one. But it was the only way I could think of to get it past the checkpoints. So what now?" Eliza asked, trying to keep the fear from creeping into her voice. "Now," Caleb said, stopping his pacing and looking directly at her, "we disappear." "You disappear. Understand? No contact. No letters, nothing. And you definitely don't go back to Mrs. Surratt's. But what about Mrs. Greenhouse?" Eliza asked, thinking of the formidable woman who had orchestrated so much from behind the scenes. "Mrs. Greenhouse," Caleb said grimly, "is a very resourceful woman. She'll manage. But you, Eliza, you're just a pawn in this game. And pawns get sacrificed all the time." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tarnished silver locket. He pressed it into her hand. "Take this. It's something to remember me by, and it might be useful someday." Eliza looked at the locket, her fingers tracing the worn surface. It felt cold and heavy in her hand. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. Caleb hesitated, his eyes filled with a fleeting sadness. "That's not something you need to know. Just trust me, Eliza. Stay safe. And don't trust anyone." He turned to leave, but then stopped at the door. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "And one more thing, Eliza, get rid of that blonde hair. Dye it, cut it, burn it. Just make sure no one ever sees it again." With that he was gone, leaving Eliza alone in the small room, the weight of the locket and the weight of the secrets she now carried heavy in her hands. The faint smell of gunpowder still clung to her clothes, a constant reminder of the danger that surrounded her. She was a pawn, yes, but a pawn who now knew too much. And in this war, knowing too much could be a death sentence. She looked at the coil of blonde hair, now discarded, on the table. It was time to disappear. Eliza stared at the discarded coil of her blonde hair, its golden sheen mocking her in the dim light. Caleb's words echoed in her mind. Get rid of it. He was right, of course. Her distinctive hair was a beacon, a calling card for anyone who might be looking for her. She had to become someone else, someone unrecognizable. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced it down. She needed a plan, a disguise, and quickly. The sun wouldn't stay hidden forever, and with each passing moment the risk of discovery increased. She glanced around the room, her eyes scanning for anything that could help. A rusty kettle sat on the hearth. A few stray pieces of charcoal lay scattered nearby. An idea, desperate but potentially life-saving, began to form. She grabbed the kettle and filled it with water from a nearby bucket. As she waited for it to heat over the meager fire, she gathered the charcoal, crushing it into a fine powder with the back of a spoon. The smell of soot filled the air, mingling with the lingering scent of gunpowder. When the water finally boiled, she carefully mixed the charcoal powder into it, creating a thick black paste. Taking a deep breath, Eliza looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The blonde hair that had once been a source of pride now seemed like a dangerous liability. With trembling hands, she began to apply the charcoal paste, coating each strand until her hair was a dull, lifeless black. The process was messy and uncomfortable, the gritty mixture staining her skin, but she persevered, driven by the fear of being caught. When she was finished, she barely recognized herself. The vibrant blonde was gone, replaced by a dark, almost severe color. She took a pair of dull scissors from a drawer and began to hack at her hair, shortening it to just below her ears. The uneven cut further altered her appearance, making her look less like a pampered southern belle and more like a hardened worker. Eliza knew the disguise wouldn't fool everyone, but it was a start. It would buy her time, allow her to move more freely without drawing immediate attention. Now she needed to disappear from this place, to create a new identity, a new life. But where to go? Caleb hadn't given her any direction, any instructions. He had simply told her to run. She fingered the locket hidden beneath her dress. It was her only connection to him, her only clue to the secrets she now possessed. She had to protect it and herself at all costs. She decided to head north towards the Union lines. It was a risky move, but she reasoned that she would be less likely to be suspected as a Confederate sympathizer if she was traveling in that direction. Besides, she couldn't stay here, in the heart of enemy territory, waiting to be discovered. As she packed a small bag with the few belongings she had, a change of clothes, some hardtack and the precious locket, she heard the sound of horses approaching. Her heart leaped into her throat. Were they looking for her? Had they already discovered her connection to Caleb? She quickly extinguished the fire and hid in the shadows, peering out the window. A group of Confederate soldiers rode past, their faces grim, their weapons at the ready. They didn't stop, didn't even glance at the house, but their presence was a stark reminder of the danger she was in. Eliza knew she couldn't delay any longer. She had to leave now. She slung the bag over her shoulder, took one last look around the room that had been her prison and her sanctuary, and slipped out the back door, melting into the darkness. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of pine and the distant rumble of cannon fire. She was alone, on the run, with a secret that could change the course of the war. And she was terrified. Eliza knew she couldn't delay any longer. She had to leave now. She slung the bag over her shoulder, took one last look around the room that had been her prison and her sanctuary, and slipped out the back door, melting into the darkness. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of pine and the distant rumble of cannon fire. She was alone, on the run, with a secret that could change the course of the war. And she was terrified. The forest offered little comfort, the branches clawing at her dress, the undergrowth snagging at her ankles. Every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through her. She moved quickly but cautiously, sticking to the shadows, using the natural cover to conceal her passage. The distant rumble of cannon fire grew louder, a constant reminder of the conflict raging around her. After what felt like hours, she reached a small dirt road. It was a risk to be on the road, more exposed, but it was faster than fighting her way through the dense undergrowth. She hesitated, listening for any sign of approaching soldiers, then darted across, disappearing into the trees on the other side. She continued north, driven by a desperate hope and fueled by adrenaline. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and her throat was parched, but she dared not stop to rest. She had to put as much distance as possible between herself and the house, between herself and the Confederacy. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, she spotted a small farmhouse in the distance. Their wisp of smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and perhaps a moment of respite. Eliza knew it was dangerous to approach, but the thought of a hot meal and a safe place to sleep was too tempting to resist. She approached cautiously, staying in the shadows, observing the house for any signs of danger. She saw a woman tending to a small vegetable garden, her face etched with worry. Eliza took a deep breath and stepped out of the trees. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm lost and I was wondering if you could help me." The woman turned, her eyes widening in surprise. She studied Eliza for a moment, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Lost, are you?" she said, her voice guarded. "Where are you headed?" Eliza hesitated. She couldn't tell this woman the truth. She couldn't risk revealing the secret she carried. I'm trying to reach my family in Maryland," she said, improvising. "My home was caught in the fighting, and I was separated from them." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Maryland, eh? That's a long way from here, and dangerous with the war and all." "I know," Eliza said, her voice pleading, "but I have to try. My family. They're all I have left." The woman sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Come inside," she said. "I'll give you something to eat. You look half-starved." Eliza followed the woman into the house, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The house was small but clean, the air filled with the aroma of wood smoke and simmering stew. A young girl sat at a table, silently reading a book. "This is my daughter, Sarah," the woman said, gesturing to the girl. "Sarah, this is—" "Eliza," she supplied quickly. "Eliza Smith." "Eliza," the woman repeated. "I'm Martha." Martha led her to the table and placed a bowl of stew in front of her. Eliza ate ravenously, savoring every bite. It was the first real meal she'd had in days. "So, Eliza," Martha said, watching her closely, "what brings you to these parts? This ain't exactly a safe place for a young woman alone." Eliza swallowed a mouthful of stew. "Like I said, I'm trying to reach my family. I heard they were heading north towards Maryland." Martha nodded slowly, but Eliza could see the suspicion in her eyes. She knew Martha didn't believe her story, but she didn't press her, at least not yet. "You can stay here tonight," Martha said, "but you'll have to be gone by morning. I can't afford to get involved in anyone else's troubles." "Thank you," Eliza said, relief flooding through her. "I appreciate your kindness more than you know." As she ate, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced at Sarah, who was still engrossed in her book, but she sensed that the girl was listening to their conversation. She knew she had to be careful to not reveal too much. She had to protect the secret she carried, no matter the cost. Later that night, as she lay on a straw pallet in the corner of the room, Eliza couldn't sleep. The events of the past few days replayed in her mind, the fear and the uncertainty gnawing at her. She clutched the locket beneath her dress, drawing strength from its presence. It was her only connection to Caleb, her only hope of finding her way through this treacherous landscape. She knew that staying with Martha was a risk. The woman clearly didn't trust her, and she had no idea what Martha might do if she discovered the truth. But she had nowhere else to go. She was alone, hunted, and she had to trust someone, even if that trust might be misplaced. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the window, Eliza rose, packed her bag, and prepared to leave. She found Martha in the kitchen tending to the fire. "I'm leaving now," Eliza said. "Thank you for your hospitality." Martha nodded, her expression unreadable. "Be careful out there," she said. "And good luck finding your family." Eliza hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver coin. "Please," she said, pressing it into Martha's hand. "Take this. For your trouble." Martha looked at the coin, then back at Eliza. "Keep it," she said. "You'll need it more than I do." Eliza nodded and turned to leave. As she reached the door, Martha spoke again. "Eliza," she said, "if you see any Union soldiers, tell them. Tell them that the people here are suffering. Tell them that we just want this war to be over." Eliza looked at Martha, her eyes filled with understanding. She knew then that Martha wasn't just a weary farmer. She was a woman caught in the middle of a conflict she didn't understand, a woman who longed for peace. "I will," Eliza said. "I promise." She stepped out into the morning light, the wind whipping through her hair, the scent of pine and wood smoke filling her lungs. She was still alone, still on the run, but she was no longer just running for herself. She was running for Martha, for Sarah, for all the innocent people caught in the crossfire of this brutal war. And she knew with a newfound certainty that she had to succeed. The secret she carried was not just her own. It was a secret that could save lives, a secret that could help bring an end to the bloodshed. And she would protect it at all costs. Eliza walked swiftly, the promise to Martha a heavy weight alongside the parchment tucked securely within her braided hair. The wind felt colder now, biting at her exposed cheeks. She tugged her shawl tighter, the worn fabric offering little warmth. She needed to get to Rose Greenhow. The information she carried, painstakingly gathered by sympathetic ears and whispered conversations, was crucial. Rose, with her connections and influence, could get it to the right hands in Richmond. Eliza just needed to reach her. The journey was fraught with peril. Union patrols were becoming more frequent, their blue uniforms a stark contrast against the muted browns and greens of the Virginia countryside. Eliza hugged the tree line, moving with a practiced stealth she'd learned from years of navigating these woods. Once she had to duck behind a thick oak as a group of soldiers rode past, their laughter echoing through the trees, a jarring sound in the otherwise silent landscape. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a frantic drum urging her onward. She reached a small abandoned church, its steeple long since fallen. It offered a brief respite, a chance to catch her breath and gather her wits. Stepping inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and decay. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Eliza leaned against a crumbling wall, pulling out a piece of dried beef from her satchel. She chewed slowly, savoring the meager sustenance. Doubt gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing? Was this information truly worth the risk? She thought of Martha's weary face, of Sarah's innocent eyes. She thought of the countless others caught in the war's relentless grip. They needed this to end. They deserved a chance at peace. The doubt receded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. As she finished her meal, she heard a sound, a twig snapping outside. Eliza froze, her senses on high alert. She moved silently to a window, peering cautiously through a crack in the boarded-up frame. Two men were approaching the church. They weren't wearing uniforms, but their rough clothes and wary expressions suggested they weren't farmers either. They moved with a purpose that spoke of something more than just seeking shelter. Eliza's mind raced. Were they Union spies, Confederate deserters, or something else entirely? She couldn't take the chance. The information she carried was too important. She slipped out the back of the church, melting back into the woods. She knew she couldn't stay on the road. She had to find a different way, a safer path to Rose Greenhow. This journey had just become even more complicated. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. Eliza found a small cave hidden behind a waterfall, a place she'd discovered as a child. It was damp and cold, but it offered shelter and concealment. She huddled inside, shivering despite her shawl. She pulled out the parchment, unbraiding a section of her hair to retrieve it. By the dim light filtering through the waterfall, she reread the message, committing it to memory. It was a complex cipher, but she knew it well. It detailed Union troop movements, supply routes, and planned offensives. Information that could save lives if it reached the right hands in time. As she finished, she heard voices outside the cave. They were close, too close. Eliza quickly rehid the parchment in her hair, her fingers trembling with fear. She pressed herself against the back wall of the cave, hoping the darkness would conceal her. "I tell you, I saw someone go in there," one of the voices said, his tone gruff and menacing. "A woman. Alone." Eliza held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. They were coming for her. She was trapped. A woman alone? Another voice echoed, laced with skepticism. You've been hitting the corn whiskey again, Jed. Probably just a deer. I ain't drunk, Silas, Jed retorted, his voice growing louder. I saw her clear as day, slipping behind that waterfall. And she weren't no deer unless deer started wearing bonnets. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut, praying they would leave. She knew these men. They were Union soldiers, part of the patrol that had been scouring the area for Confederate sympathizers. If they found her, she'd be arrested, imprisoned, maybe even hanged. All right, Silas conceded, though Eliza could hear the suspicion in his voice. Let's just take a quick look. But if it's a wild goose chase, you're buying the next round, Jed. Eliza heard the crunch of boots on gravel as they approached the waterfall. She scanned the cave frantically, searching for an escape, a weapon, anything. But there was nothing. She was cornered. The waterfall masked her breathing, but she knew they'd hear her heart hammering against her ribs if they got close enough. She closed her eyes, picturing Rose Greenhow, the legendary Confederate spy. Rose wouldn't cower. Rose would fight. Taking a deep breath, Eliza steeled herself. She wouldn't go down without a fight. She straightened her back, ready to face whatever came next. The first soldier, Jed, pushed aside the curtain of water, his rifle raised. His eyes widened as he saw her. Well, he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. What do we have here? Looks like we found ourselves a little bird, Silas said, stepping into the cave behind Jed. A Confederate bird, judging by the look of her. Eliza met their gaze, her expression defiant. I am no bird, she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. I am an American citizen. An American citizen aiding and abetting the enemy, Jed sneered. That makes you a traitor, little bird. He took a step closer, his rifle still pointed at her chest. Now let's see what you're hiding. He reached out to grab her. Eliza reacted instantly. She sidestepped his grab, using the momentum to push past him towards the cave entrance. Jed stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. She's getting away. Silas yelled, raising his rifle. Eliza burst through the waterfall, the icy water stinging her skin. She ran, her lungs burning, her feet slipping on the wet rocks. She knew she couldn't outrun them. They were soldiers, armed and on horseback. But she had to try. She darted between trees, scrambling over fallen logs, desperate to put as much distance between herself and the cave as possible. She could hear them crashing through the underbrush behind her, their shouts echoing through the woods. Suddenly she tripped, her ankle twisting beneath her. A sharp pain shot up her leg, and she cried out, collapsing onto the ground. She tried to get up, but her ankle wouldn't support her weight. She was trapped. The soldiers were closing in. She could hear their heavy breathing, the crackle of leaves beneath their boots. She looked around frantically, searching for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Jed and Silas emerged from the trees, their rifles trained on her. Nowhere left to run, little bird, Jed said, his voice dripping with triumph. Eliza glared at them, her eyes filled with defiance. I would rather die than betray my cause, she said, her voice trembling but unwavering. Silas chuckled. We'll see about that. He gestured towards Jed. Search her. See what she's carrying. Jed approached Eliza cautiously, his eyes scanning her for any sign of resistance. He reached out to search her pockets. Eliza knew she had to protect the message at all costs. It was too important to fall into the wrong hands. As Jed's hand reached for her hair, she knew what she had to do. The voices grew closer, the men's heavy footsteps echoing in the confined space outside the cave. Eliza knew she couldn't stay hidden. They'd find her eventually, and what they'd do then was far worse than capture. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the cave, the cascading water momentarily obscuring her from view. 2 Union soldiers stood there, rifles raised, their faces hard. Hold it right there, one barked, his eyes narrowed. What are you doing here, woman? Eliza raised her hands, feigning innocence. Just taking a walk, she stammered. I got lost. The soldiers exchanged skeptical glances. Lost, huh? In the middle of nowhere, near known Confederate sympathizers. I live nearby, Eliza insisted, her voice trembling slightly. My family, they're waiting for me. The other soldier stepped forward, his eyes scanning her up and down. You look familiar. Haven't I seen you around town? Eliza's heart leaped into her throat. She recognized him. He was one of the guards at the Union headquarters, the one who always seemed to watch her a little too closely. I don't think so, she said, trying to sound confident. I rarely leave my house, he smirked. That's not what I heard. I heard you were a bit of a traveler, delivering messages, perhaps. Eliza knew she was caught. There was no point in denying it anymore. What if I am? She said, her voice hardening. What if I'm helping my people defend their homes? Then you're a traitor, the soldier snarled, lowering his rifle. And traitors get what they deserve. He lunged for her, grabbing her arm. Eliza struggled, but he was too strong. She knew she had to act fast. Remembering the small knife she kept hidden in her boot, she kicked out, connecting with his shin. He yelped in pain, releasing his grip. Eliza seized the opportunity, darting towards the nearby river. She plunged into the water, the cold shocking her system. The river's current was strong, pulling her downstream. She could hear the soldiers shouting behind her, but she didn't dare look back. Eliza swam with all her might, the weight of her wet clothes dragging her down. She knew this river well. She'd played in it as a child. She knew the hidden currents, the submerged rocks. She saw a fallen log ahead, partially submerged in the water. She swam towards it, grabbing hold and pulling herself out of the main current. She clung to the log, gasping for breath, her body numb with cold. She watched as the soldiers ran along the riverbank, searching for her. They were getting closer. Eliza knew she couldn't stay there. Taking another deep breath, she let go of the log and plunged back into the water. She swam underwater, using the current to carry her further downstream. She knew of a small island a few miles away, a place where she could hide until nightfall. The swim was grueling, the cold was relentless, and her muscles were screaming in protest. But she kept going, driven by the knowledge that lives depended on her. Finally, she reached the island, collapsing on the sandy shore, shivering uncontrollably. She was exhausted, but she was alive. As darkness fell, Eliza made her way to the mainland. She knew she couldn't go back to her old life. She was a wanted woman now, her face known to the Union soldiers, but she also knew that she couldn't give up. The Confederacy needed her, and she wouldn't let them down. She continued her work as a spy, using her wit and courage to outsmart the enemy. She became even more careful, more resourceful. She learned to trust no one, to rely only on herself. Rose Greenhouse's story became her inspiration. The way she cleverly hid messages in her hair became a symbol of Eliza's defiance and ingenuity. The bravery with which she faced death fueled Eliza's determination. Months later, as the war raged on, Eliza found herself on a ship bound for Europe, carrying crucial information for Confederate diplomats. She knew the risks were high, but she was willing to do anything to help her cause. But fate had other plans. A storm arose, tossing the ship violently. Eliza, along with many others, was thrown overboard. As she struggled in the churning water, she felt the weight of the gold coins sewn into her dress, a fortune meant to support the Confederacy. The weight dragged her down, pulling her further and further beneath the waves. She thought of her family, her friends, the cause she had fought so hard for. She thought of Rose Greenhouse, her idol, who had met a similar fate. As the darkness closed in, Eliza smiled. She had lived a life of purpose, a life of courage. She had done everything she could to make a difference. The last thing she saw was the faint light of the moon, shimmering on the surface of the water. Then darkness. The next morning, her body washed ashore, the gold still sewn into her dress. But the information she carried, the secrets hidden in her heart, would live on, inspiring others to fight for what they believed in. Eliza died a spy, a patriot, a hero. She was a woman who had dared to defy the odds, who had risked everything for her beliefs. And though her life was cut short, her legacy would endure, a testament to the power of courage, determination, and unwavering faith. The waves